I'll give you a mini bio of me, just so that way you sort of know, you know, the background or whatever as we launch into the call. I'm the weekend parenting columnist for CBC Radio. I'm the author of about 30 books, including I guess my best-selling book was called The Mother of All Pregnancy Books, and it's been out for about 20 years and has, I can't remember how many copies it sold, but it's been in multiple markets and so on, and it's now in its third Canadian edition. And then more recently, I have two more recent books, Happy Parents, Happy Kids, that came out in 2019. And before that, Parenting Through the Storm, which came out in 2015, which is about supporting a child or parenting a child who has a mental health, neurodevelopmental, or behavioral challenge. Because all four of my kids had some kind of challenge. My kids are now, by the way, young adults. They're between the ages of 22 and 31. So they're kind of like old kids.
Right. So you went through this when this wasn't really talked about then.
Yeah. I've been through a lot. And I mean, some of my earliest books were about pregnancy after miscarriage or stillbirth. I went through those kind of things. So I guess that's the perspective I bring to parenting. I'm obviously a very happy, optimistic person, but I've also had some really challenging things happen over the years. So I always assume that anybody could be dealing with anything in their life. And so we should always assume the best of intentions of people. And so if somebody's struggling, there's probably a good reason. So.
Yeah. Wow. That is absolutely incredible. Well, what is I would love to know a little bit about your, like the book, the one that you wrote before Happy Parents, Happy Kids, just because that's kind of where I've come from. And
yeah. Yeah, well, Parenting Through the Storm and Happy Parents, Happy Kids were both published by HarperCollins Canada. And there's also a US edition of Parenting Through the Storm. So I guess I've sort of looked at it like the challenges kids go through different systems, like, the education system, the healthcare system, coming to a diagnosis, working through the challenges as a family, because as you know, it's overwhelming and exhausting when you're in the peak of the struggle. But I also feel that families and parents are both really resilient. Children and kids families are, and that you can come through hard times and come out the other side. So we could talk about that if you wanted. We could talk about sort of like both layers of it. Happy Parents, Happy Kids focuses sort of like on, mainstream parenting issues and how to cope and how to increase your enjoyment of parenting. And Parenting Through the Storm talks about getting through those times of struggle as a family. And I think that, at different times in our lives, we can sort of be in both camps, right? So.
Wow. Yes. Well, and that's exactly where we have come from. We had a child who was suicidal at age 8 in our house. Opposition.
Yeah. So you've been through a lot. Yeah.
Yeah, and so that's what my book, Bring Them Closer, is all about, is how we got through.
Yes.
A psychologist had asked me, because he threw fits of rage. That's the way he showed his depression.
Yeah.
He asked me, so what do you do when he's throwing these rages? I said,
yes.
I send him to his room. That's how I was raised.
Yeah.
She said, you never send the hurting away. You bring them closer.
Yeah.
And so it's a journey of what that looked like in the mess, in the madness. Yes. And I think that your book with the storm,
Parenting Through the Storm. Yeah.
Parenting Through the Storm. I'm going to look that up while you're chatting with everybody when we're on, because I think right now it feels like a storm.
It does. It absolutely does.
I had a parent say to me yesterday, her situation is quite severe. She has a child. She can't seem to get the proper help right now, not the proper just support that she needs. And her child is very aggressive. He actually pushed her down the stairs the other day. And she's like, I feel like I'm quarantined in an abusive relationship that I can't get out of.
Yeah, that's overwhelming.
Yeah. So there will be people today that are experiencing some really hard things, as well as just being quarantined is hard.
Yes, indeed. Even with people we love, it does not feel like normal life.
No, exactly. Yeah. So I'm really excited. I definitely want to go through, what's the number? I would actually add one more question. What's the one thing you would say to parents who are in the storm like you were? And then what would you say to just an average family who's just kind of going through everything? What's
Yeah.
the one thing that you feel, and then chat about these books. I would love if you're open to
Yeah,
chat
for
about
sure.
your own story a little bit.
Yeah, totally. I mean, it's wound into everything I write. As you can see, I'm a put my cards on the table kind of person. And, I'm obviously really clear about what I can share and what I can't share, because being the kid's mother, I'm privy to information that isn't public. But on the other hand, when I wrote Parenting Through the Storm, I interviewed the kids for my book as well as 50 other families. And so I had the kids' explicit permission to talk about some of the challenges we went through as a family. So.
Oh my goodness. Well, I'm going to be ordering this book as soon as we get off this webinar, because I
Thank
love
you.
hearing the perspectives of people who have overcome. And
Yeah, that's what got me through like the hardest times, when, just knowing that there were other people who'd been on a similar journey, and maybe they were a little further on in their family's journey, and you could think like there is a possibility that things will get better when it feels so dark right now. So,
yeah.
yeah.
And 30 books. You've written 30 books.
Yeah.
Oh,
But I've been doing this since the late 90s, so it's not like I did them all last week or anything. It's been, I guess, pretty much my life's work is just writing. I'm a full-time writer and do, the CBC thing. Once every 6 weeks, I go in studio and I do a roundup of interviews across the country. But my main thing is being a writer. So.
oh, that's amazing. And is that your background? Like, so what is your
I have
back?
a degree in history of all things, but history prepares you well for being a really good researcher. So I've spent decades writing magazine articles and newspaper articles, and now of course website stuff, and then pivoted into radio. And so I think that the research skills I learned at university have been invaluable to sort of like, my growth as a writer and even as a human. I mean, you can see like this is a fraction of the books I own because I had to get rid of tons of them because we downsized, and it was like breaking up one by one with a whole bunch of friends as I had to decide which books to donate. So
Right?
yeah.
I bet. Wow. Well, that's quite fascinating. And it's funny when you say since the late 90s, I feel like that was 10 years ago.
I know. And then you do the math and it's like, what?
That wasn't 10 years
I
ago. That was
know.
a while ago. Yeah, so that's it's interesting how quickly time goes.
Indeed.
Yeah, so well, I'm super super excited. Have you always lived in
In
Ontario?
Yeah. Yeah. I grew up in Mississauga, and we raised our kids in Peterborough. We still have our house in Peterborough, but we've pretty much moved up north. And so just at some point we have to clear out all the kid clutter that's in the house in Peterborough, and then we can sell it, because right now somebody would just think they were getting a dumpster for free or something. So
Right. Well, I know my husband is from Ontario. That's grew up in Etobicoke.
oh, nice.
Yeah. Well, he grew up
It's
actually
next
living.
door to Mississauga, so yeah.
Yeah. So I feel like I kind of know out there a little bit, and one of my mentors actually lives out there, does a lot of work on Young Street and with a lot of people experiencing homelessness, and so
Nice.
able to get out there a couple times. And yeah, yeah. So
Cool.
it's a neat place. It's different than out here in Calgary.
Yes. Yeah. Yeah, it's funny because a couple of years ago, well, maybe I guess it was about 6 years ago now, or maybe it was 8, I don't know, but a while ago, the Writers Union of Canada hired me to go across Canada and do a speaking tour in different cities, helping to coach authors on, so like, publicity and social media and all that kind of stuff. And it's funny, the different cultures, like even the culture is different between Calgary and Edmonton, I found. Like Calgary's very, very business oriented, whereas Edmonton seemed to have a little bit more of an alternative artsy kind of twist to it. I don't know, maybe it's just the perceptions of an outsider, but I remember even like Vancouver versus Victoria, like it's like a shift.
Very
So
different. Yeah, very different. I used to live in Vancouver for 14 years, and yeah, it's well, even the different areas of Vancouver, where I did my resilience work in East Vancouver with a lot of
right.
street youth, and just from East Vancouver to North Vancouver. Very,
Indeed.
very
Yeah.
different. Yeah. So it's funny, hey, how we're all different with these places that we come from, and yet this has been really
Yes.
uniting us
It
in
certainly has.
interesting ways. Yeah. What's the and if anyone's just joining, we're just chatting before we start, so you haven't missed anything. I don't want anyone to think that they've missed anything. We're sitting here chatting away. We're going to start at noon. Um, but what has been something that you've noticed with COVID? Something that you've seen in your world that it's affected?
Yeah, I think just the layers and layers of stress on parents. Like, I think that parents were already struggling before we headed into this crisis. And I think that that has just ramped up enormously. And I really think that, when we come out the other side of this, we have to look at doing a better job of providing support to parents all the time so that if bad things happen, people aren't pushed to the breaking point.
Yeah. No, I highly agree, because it really shows where we've been very broken.
Yes.
Yeah. So it's I know for us, when we went through the crisis with our oldest, we actually brought him home. He couldn't go to school after being in the hospital for 3 weeks. He actually went through more anxiety when he got home because he was
Yeah.
separated from us, and so I had to, lose my income and homeschool him. This was all very
Yeah.
brand new. I didn't know what I was doing. But it's interesting how, home, actually being in the same place as him, bringing him home,
Yeah.
actually brought healing to us.
Yes.
So I see it as a huge opportunity if parents are given the right tools right
Yeah,
now.
for sure.
Yeah. And then I was able to figure out ways to create an income that were able to sustain us, not in the same way as before, um,
Right.
working full time, but definitely providing for our needs. And so, yeah, I'm doing whatever I can in my corner, and you're doing whatever you can in your corner.
Yeah. Yeah, I was very intrigued to see about your culture podcast. You do all kinds of interesting creative things. So,
Yeah. Well, the Culture Rebel podcast is interesting because it's kind of a little bit of every part of me. So the parenting, the resilience, mental health is a part of me, but I'm also someone who really loves to challenge the way things are, culture, and and I'm also a hip hop dancer. So
holy Toledo, that's eclectic.
you know, so there we are.
Yes, I am not a hip hop dancer. So anybody who's tuning in for that, it's not going to happen on my side of the screen. Look at that side.
That's really funny. Yeah, yeah. Well, we're so thankful that you're here. We're going to get started. I see that there's people starting to come in. And if you've been listening, Anne and I have been sitting here chatting just for the last, 15 minutes, because I have never met Anne. This is us meeting. This is the present day, modern day meeting, and also COVID meetings.
Yes.
Here we are. If you don't know me, my name is Connie Jacob, and I am the one that does these webinars once a week because we really need to support families right now. And Anne is just a dear soul. I met her on Twitter with a mutual friend, Sarah Austin, who leads our Children's First Canada, and really trying to make sure that children are safe. Right now,
Yeah.
Canada only ranks as number 25 in the world for child safety. And that tells me that there's a lot of brokenness that goes on behind closed doors that no one talks about. And now we have brought that into a pandemic. And
Yes.
so, I just want to make sure that everyone knows that as you're here, you are safe. What's nice is that you're hidden, so your face isn't seen, and I just hope that everything that's shared in our webinar, we can't save the world in an hour, but we certainly want to be a safe place and a support. I was chatting with some parents about just some of the things that they're feeling right now. If they're feeling overwhelmed and stressed, and I never signed up to be a homeschool parent, and I just want to get through a webinar without my children fighting. Like there's a lot of interesting new pressures, and so I've brought Anne. Ann Douglas is a CBC The Weekend. You have to tell me
Yeah,
again.
the weekend parenting columnist for CBC Radio and the author of a number of books on parenting, including most recently, this sounds like a commercial, I promise it won't after this, but including Happy Parents, Happy Kids and Parenting Through the Storm were my two most recent books.
Amazing. And we were chatting about these books, and we're going to chat some more because I think that every single person needs to get on these books after
Thank
we're
you.
done. So we want to just start. I want to let everyone know in the call that if you have a question, please feel free to just put it in the chat box, and we will cover it. This is definitely an interactive experience. You can sit back and listen, but if there's something pressing at any time, please feel free to just write it out in the chat box. I'm going to keep my eye on that at all times. And yeah, because we want to maximize this time for you. We have Anne, who's all the way from Ontario, 2 hours ahead of us in Calgary if you're here, wherever you're listening from. And so please, at any time, be free to ask any question. Are you all currently on mute? Yes, we cannot see you and we cannot hear you. Isn't that great? Your children could be screaming right now and we have no idea.
It all sounds blissful to us.
Now, if my children scream, you'll hear. You might hear my little guy laughing. He was laughing earlier. It was cute.
Aw, nice.
Yeah. So Anne, let's get into this. So tell us a little bit about just about yourself, about these books. Actually, I want to dive into the books first and then dive into what you would say to parents. But tell us about this first book, about parenting through the storm.
Okay, yeah. Parenting Through the Storm was the result of what our family figured out after weathering a number of storms together. So it's about parenting a child who has a mental health, neurodevelopmental, or behavioral challenge, which could be anything from, anxiety, depression, an eating disorder, ADHD, and autism spectrum disorder, like pretty much anything you can think of that sort of falls into that category. And all four of my kids have had one or more of those kinds of struggles. So maybe it might be helpful if I told you a little bit about my family's story, sort of related to that and how that sort of led to the book, because everything in my life seems to come out of personal experience, right? So all four of my kids had a really hard time. In fact, our family went through a storm, a powerful storm, about 15 years ago. And at the time, our oldest, Julie, was, I guess, around grade 9. And she had developed an eating disorder. She had had some, terrible experiences with bullying at school. And at the end of her grade 8 year, in a moment of despair, wanting to sort of numb the pain, came dangerously close to ending her life by taking way too many extra strength Tylenol. And for other families who've been through this experience, I just want to say, like, we were lucky. I know so many other families who had a similar trajectory or story, and then the story didn't end happily with the child still being here. And I would never want anyone to think that I had some magical toolkit or that I was a better parent or anything like that. I really think a lot of it came down to luck, just, checking on her in the right moment, getting her to the hospital, and, the stars aligning for us that night. So that's what was going on with Julie. And then all four kids actually have ADHD. So, and my boys in particular, my two middle boys in particular, are extremely high energy. And if anybody else has a kid like this in their family, they know what it's like to have a kid who's extremely bright, extremely creative, and resourceful and inexhaustible, unlike the parents. So we went through so many conflicts with the school and, the dreaded phone lighting up during the day. Could you come and get so-and-so? They've been suspended for the day or whatever. So a lot of challenges along those lines. Our third kid, Eric, also has a learning disability, and our youngest, Ian, is on the autism spectrum. So when things were at their worst for our family, there was a lot going on all at once. But then fast forward to, the recent present, I guess, or the almost present. And all four kids are doing really well. Everybody has grown into young adulthood. They're between the ages of 22 and 31. And, everybody is gainfully employed. Everybody is in a happy, healthy relationship. Like, way beyond what I would have thought possible back at the peak of the storm, when I thought, how are we even going to raise these kids to adulthood, let alone have everybody thrive? So
You're
if
saying there's
somebody's,
hope.
pardon me, there
You're
is
saying
hope.
there's
Yeah, for
hope.
sure. And
Oh,
if somebody's listening and they're really feeling discouraged, I just want you to know, like, I know what it feels like to be in that really overwhelmed, dark place. And I also know that both kids and parents are really resilient, and we can get through these storms together. So that sort of was my impetus in wanting to write Parenting Through the Storm. And I didn't want it to just be like rooted in my own family story. That would be pretty boring to write, 288 pages or whatever based on my family. So I went out and I interviewed 50 other families to get their best advice to other parents on weathering the storm. And I also interviewed a number of clinicians and researchers and so on. And that's sort of what I boiled down, take all those ingredients, boil them in a pot, and eventually you have a book. But you've been through the book writing process too, Connie, so you know how much synthesis and hard work goes on behind the scenes.
it's a lot. It's a lot. Yeah. Well, that's if anyone's listening and you have a child like that, I don't know. I was getting hope because my oldest, who was 8, when he was suicidal, and now we're not there. We're not in crisis now, but now he's 13.
Which is a challenge in and of itself.
It is, and we still, of course, you never fix your child out of depression, out of anxiety. They're not projects to be fixed. They're not these are normal human emotions. And you had some very interesting extra things involved there too, with all of your children, all 4. And I want to maybe point out also to any parents watching right now, a lot of times we think, what's wrong with me? Is there something wrong with me? And I'm looking at Anne, and she has a history degree. She's written 30 books and is a beautiful human. And look at that. I hope that gives us all hope to know that, if your child is struggling, of course, there's always things that we can look at on the inside of us, because that's who we control. But it's not because you're not fill in the blank.
Right.
Mental health concerns are hitting people who are families that are educated and not educated, well off and not well off. It's really no respecter of persons. So just take a nice deep breath and realize that you're not alone. So
Yeah, I think that's a really important point, because so often parents will go into this sort of self-blame and really self-critical kind of mode. So I'll have people saying to me at presentations, "You're going to think I'm the worst parent in the world," and things like that. And really, I would just say that, having a child who's struggling doesn't make you a bad parent, just as being a child who's struggling doesn't make your child a bad kid. It just means your family's dealing with a particular challenge. So to be kind to yourself, and of course, do the self-reflection, see if there are things in the family that could shift to help everybody to function better, but don't look at it like, my family's defective, I'm defective, like that sort of negative lens.
yeah, absolutely. And what would you say to someone right now who is in the place where you were? They're in the storm. What was the number one thing or a couple of things that got you through?
I think a big thing was reaching out for support to other people who had been through similar challenges with their kids. And actually, when I wrote Parenting Through the Storm, I actually dedicated it to 3 people who really helped me get through that time. There was my friend Lori, who actually lives on the West Coast. And because of the miracle of time zones, I could email her at night and say, "I am losing my mind, help." And she would, send me words of wisdom overnight, so that in the morning I'd get up to a message of support and encouragement. And then there was my friend Darlene, who had a daughter with an eating disorder. And so ironically, we would go go out for lunch together and talk about how challenging it is to have a kid with an eating disorder. And she supported me through that. And then there's my cousin Karen, who also has a couple of boys on the autism spectrum. And she was my guide when Ian first got his diagnosis. And we were trying to figure out, like, what does this mean? What supports do we need for him and all that? So I think that getting social support from kind, encouraging people who have faced similar challenges, that is like the number one thing you can do to weather the storm.
Yeah, I agree. I agree. And sometimes these people will be the people you least expect. Um,
Yes.
for me, I I lost friends when we went through our challenge because I couldn't just always leave the house. There were times my husband had tapped out. He's like, you cannot leave me with these
Yeah.
children here. And so I couldn't just go out all the time. And sometimes my friends didn't understand that. And I know that's not a problem right now. None of us, we're not going anywhere. But sometimes the people who supported me were the people I least expected. And the ones
Yeah.
who I expected were the ones who just didn't know how to. And I think to be open to who might be in your corner right now, who is naturally gravitating towards your story, and allowing yourself to show some bravery to just test the water, see if they are able to support. And I just want to put out there that we right here, this community, every Tuesday, as well as we have a group coaching time. I wouldn't even call it a coaching time. It's more of a sharing time. If you're alone, absolutely 100% alone right now, and you don't have anyone to turn to, um, please let me know, because we can journey with you for sure. But Anne, when it comes to right now, parents are in the house with their kids, they're working, they're not, they're homeschooling and they don't want to. There's a lot of interesting pressures. What do you believe are some of the top things that you would want parents to know right at this moment?
I think that everybody is finding this really hard. It's not just you, because I think sometimes you look on Instagram or something and everybody else is making sourdough bread from scratch and doing these amazing Pinterest worthy crafts and everything. And you feel like, wait a minute. So I think find your people who are really real. When I was on another call last week, one of the parents who came on camera talked about how in her house, they'd come to the point where they were going to entertain the toddler by giving him a cup of flour. Which I thought was an amazingly hilarious and creative solution, because it's like this mom had literally hit the wall, right? It's like she's trying to do her work, and she's, was a single parent and trying to meet all these other, demands in the background. She finally thought, what do we have in abundance? I guess in her house they had flour. Not everybody has flour in abundance, but she thought, well, if it buys me a little bit of time, so I think comparing notes with people like that as opposed to the sourdough bread queens.
Yeah, anyone who keeps it real right now, and doesn't that just make you feel joyful, when you
Yes.
hear of these, and maybe not to take things so seriously. Like when you first said that, I thought of what I would do if I did that with my boys, and I kind of went, but I mean, why not? I got nothing else to do.
It would definitely give you some time to clean up. Like you'd have a task for a few hours after that one.
Isn't that the truth? Yes, exactly. Sandra has a question here. She says she has a 12-year-old girl. They just moved from Ontario, and this was, of course, hard for her daughter. But she doesn't know how to approach. The daughter doesn't know how to approach. She's always angry. She doesn't talk to us. She wants to stay all the time on the phone, and I'm sure she's not talking with her old friends. She's decided to talk never again to them, and she's desperate and worried for her. What would you say
Aw.
to Sandra?
Yeah, that is a really hard situation, and it hurts your heart as the parent to see your child struggling like that. So I guess even though it may feel like she's really pushing you away in this moment, because when kids are upset or depressed or angry, they don't express a lot of appreciation or warmth towards their parents. That may be the understatement of the year, but know that even if you just keep making the approach, reaching out, sending love in her direction, even if it feels like she's just taking that love and throwing it aside, a lot of it is landing. And I think just looking for those moments of openness and opportunity when maybe there's, a shared laugh or something that sort of like opens up the conversation, and just letting her know that you recognize how hard this is. Because I think sometimes it's hard to talk about those things as a family. You could feel like, oh, I feel so bad for her. What if we hadn't had to make this move? Or what if we hadn't chosen to make this move? It can add to a lot of guilt feelings in you, which can make it easy to want to shut down the emotions in your child. And I'm not saying that's the dynamic in play here, but just if we can say, this kind of sucks for everybody right now. It's hard for the parents, it's hard for the kids, and we can just sort of like embrace that awfulness, and then know that, there can be also moments of joy and connection. I mean, I don't have the kind of family that's likely to make a dance party video, but a lot of families are doing that right now. So, we'll all have our own thing. We had a family Zoom call the other night with our kids across the country, and what I always laugh about our family Zoom calls is like, half the family's willing to go on camera. The other people insist on just being black boxes with their names on it. And it's the tech savvy kids who won't come on camera. So, we all make the best of this situation, and I guess just send out love in any way you can. But I do really understand. And 12 is an exceptionally challenging age, to be only followed by 13, 14, and 15 and other really challenging ages. It seems to be a window of intensity, and that's hard for parents, right?
It is. It is. I love how you said to just have empathy, let her know that, yes, this is hard. I think sometimes that's all they want. They don't want us to fix. I know my
Yeah.
13-year-old son is in his man cave right now, and I joke with him when he finally does come up the stairs. I'm like, it is so nice to see you. I feel like I haven't seen you in so long. I just joke. But he really is quite isolated right now. He is on his phone. And he has told me um, that he's feeling like, I don't know, why do I get up? What's the point right now? He's not feeling depressed. He's just feeling like, what's the point? What's the use? And honestly, like my mom heart, when you're the mom, you're right there. It's very close. And I go into, oh my goodness, I have to fix this for you. Um, and then I remember what I say to everybody else, and that is I just invade his space once in a while. I go in there and I give him a big hug, and I just say, hey, I'm just giving you a hug. There's really not much to say. And I think
Yeah.
with teens, you get 12 years old, grade 7, 8, 9, they just want to know that you're there. And that's
Yes.
kind of it.
Yeah, I did a weird thing over the Easter weekend. I decided that I was feeling really sappy. I don't know if it was just the emotions of, this time that we're in and so on. And I thought, I just really feel like reading the kids that children's book. I used to read them every night before bedtime. So I decided to make them a video. So I did. I recorded myself reading the book, and then I recorded the book itself in case they wanted to look at the pictures again, and me reading it again while I made the video. And I sent it to them. And I think they really liked it. Like 2 of them responded immediately. 1 responded 2 days later. 1 hasn't said anything, but that kid never says anything. So I'm feeling like 3 out of 4 positive reviews on the video is actually pretty amazing. And it was something I did as much for myself as for them, because I thought, like, and this may sound a little bit, sort of negative, but what if something happens to me? I hope nothing's going to happen to me, but what if in this uncertain time something does? I want to at least have done that thing that would say to them, if they had to pull up a video of me 5 years from now or something, that they would see that, my love for them never waned, even into adulthood. I mean, if anything, it's stronger, right? So
That's so good. And yes, feel free, anyone who has any questions, just ask. I see some questions here. Steph asks, when do you make decisions for yourself and not just for the kids? I feel like I have to sacrifice everything for them, and I'm on the back burner, miserable.
yes.
We live in a small town, and my partner is in Calgary. We've been struggling financially with job losses just to allow them to hopefully graduate in our town. It would be better for me to move to Calgary and have my partner's support. The girls love him and his kids, but I feel super guilty about moving them. I've told them we may need to move instead of next year as we've been planning. I'm losing my mind.
Yes, I think a lot of us can relate to that. And I mean, there is a certain amount of sacrifice involved in being a parent. I mean, it starts the moment you have a baby or whatever, or, you know, bring that little person home if you've just adopted a child. Like the rules of the game change overnight. But I also think we can't be in perpetual self sacrifice mode where we never get to do anything. Like when I think back to my mom's generation, that was more the norm in the role of the mom, right? Like you constantly put your needs on the back burner. I don't think she ever did anything like really pampering of herself. You know, I think like she got like the most basic haircut. She never, you know, did anything sort of fun, and like going to a spa would have been an alien experience for her. Whereas women of my generation, you might have like a sister spa day or a girlfriend getaway or something like that. Um, and I think that just that's the legacy we've inherited, that, you know, mothers should make endless sacrifices. But I know I get really grumpy if I never get to do anything that is important to me. And like for me, writing or being creative is really important. And my husband and I often joke about, you know, it's to his benefit for me to have time to do writing and to take care of myself, because if I don't get that time, everybody gets to have a grumpiest version of me. So I think there's that. And family decisions, I mean, you're balancing off the needs and interests of all the people in the family. And what are the odds that everything would always be perfectly aligned? So sometimes you have to make tough decisions and you have to make tough calls as a parent. And I think it's just explaining to your kid what some of your thinking was so that they know that their needs were factored in. And, you know, I thought of this and I thought of that, and ultimately we decided to go this route, and I see that this is really hard for you. You know, I think it can be all of those things all at once.
I couldn't agree more. Yeah. And I couldn't agree more with making sure that you don't put yourself on the back burner. I always when we were in crisis, I would kind of cringe when I would see self-care posts that look like bubble baths and reading a
Yes.
book by a fire. I'm like, that doesn't happen, like not in my
Yeah.
world. But at the same time, for me, I would wake up before my kids. I'm like, you know what? If this is the only time I get, then this is what time I'm getting up early. I'm going to have my hour. I'm going to do whatever I want in this hour. And then in this particular quarantine, I have said to my children, look, in order for us to all survive, in fact, in order for you to survive,
It
this
would
is
be
what I
best
need.
if. Indeed.
And
And
so it's
you know,
good. Sorry.
I'm glad you're talking about the self-care guilt, because that's actually a major theme in Happy Parents, Happy Kids. And when I talked to parents, they told me that there's so much guilt around self-care. You either feel guilty because you do it or because you don't do it.